afternoon, and welcome to today's Ask the Rabbi, Volume 3. We have quite a bit of content to get through, and yes, I recall that there was a request to have it in the morning. This was as close to the morning as I could get it this week. So, without further ado, we will begin to address the questions that we have received on social media. I also welcome live questions as well. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out, there's new content on the YouTube channel. So we'll give people just one more moment to log in over here and get rolling with the class. And we'll start with the questions. A lot of times people will go, oh, it's time for the class. If not, you can always catch the replay. We're always into instant replay nowadays. Okay. We have a lot of questions here. So, the question was the following. Lots of questions about statues. What are the following considered avodah zarah? Are they considered things that are worshipped and are therefore idols and need to be destroyed, and is there a problem? So, are statues of Catholic saints considered idols? What about the crucifix and the Virgin Mary? So, generally speaking, all types of idols set up by non-Jews to which they ascribe certain powers, to which they believe that the powers can be effective through prayer or offerings to those things, it is problematic. So therefore, these things, the saints and the crucifixes and the Virgin Mary, are a problem. And therefore, you should try to remove them from your space. Now, you need not necessarily destroy them, because sometimes people just have them around nowadays for artwork, not because they necessarily believe in them, but you should try to have them not in your space and definitely not around you, if you can remove them. There was one hospital that I went to where the crucifixes were nailed firmly to the wall. So I went in there and I covered them, because they can have them nailed to the wall, but we can have the right to cover them. Shouldn't have to feel like we have to get treated by a doctor in the United States and have to experience some of that. And the other questions were Native American Kakina dolls or Cocopelis. Same thing that they ascribe. They're kind of cute little dolls over here. They look like they are cornhusk dolls, and they have little they have very colorful outfits on them. They are problematic as well if people believe that they can accomplish something. I recently was talking with a group of rabbis about certain places where they have an altar to the Buddha up there. I am fairly certain that since that is the name of an avodah zarah, that people ascribe power to it. But some people were still of the opinion that they don't ascribe it as a power; it's simply a philosophy, and so it would be different than, so it'd be more like Confucius than it would be like ascribing power to saints and others who perform miracles. Now, if you're staying somewhere and they have all these idols around, right, and you didn't know that going into it, simply take those idols and put them away. You need not necessarily destroy them. So go ahead and just simply put them away. Okay, second question was, let's say you're traveling and you do not have wine or grape juice for Friday night. So I know alcohol and other things can be used on Saturday, but what about Friday night? So you have one of two options. You can use Chamar Medina, which is other types of alcoholic beverages, which would be fine. Some people allow even other beverages that would be served at a fancy meal, like orange juice that would often be served. That would be fine. The other option is to not use either of those and to just say the Kiddush on bread. So you wash first, recite the full Kiddush, make hamotzi, and then you're fine. But for the next day, you really need something to drink. Does a barbed wire fence around a property out in the boonies count as an eruv or enclose the property as a private domain? It can, assuming it is unique to your house only and you're the only ones there. The only issue might be the one gate that swings open. You would have to tie it closed. and possibly build get a frame over it. But if you tie it closed and keep it keep it from moving open, your Eruv would be fine all Shabbos long as well. That would be fine. Barbed wire fence sounds very intense, but I guess if it's really far out there, it's probably to keep animals out. So you could then carry inside that whole domain. Another thing that we carry from inside the house to outside the house. Now, if you just left stuff outside the house without an Eruv, if the stuff stays outside of the house, never comes in, you could then move it around that enclosure freely, as long as you don't bring it into and out of the house. That's really more of the problem in those cases. The other question is sand muksa. Sand that's on the ground is technically muksa. You may walk on it, but you may not handle it. You may not put an egg into the sand to heat something up. So that's what the case is for that. And so those are part of it. There should be a masechta called Masechet camping on that. Okay. Another question I had was, can you prepare tradition instant soup on Shabbos? And the question was posed specifically about Sephardic tradition. And what about Ashkenazi tradition? So if you are of Sephardic extraction, Rabbi Yosef in Chazon Avadia writes that one may use hot water poured from a Kli Rishon into tradition soups. The noodles are pre-cooked. They are cooked in oil. And so they're cooked one time in oil. So therefore, when you are reheating them, you're doing cooking after cooking, which is not a problem according to Sephardic tradition. However, Ashkenazi tradition has a problem with it. So you need to use a Kli Shlishi, which means you would take your hot water, put it into a second cup, and then go ahead and pour it into your tradition soup container. Another question was, what about reheating the water? And so on Shabbat, I said you can't reheat the water. The water had to be already hot and kept warm in an urn before Shabbos. Okay. Here's a tough question. So, Shechianu on first fruits of the season. The question was from a book. It says that since imported fruit comes from all over the world, should one just rely on having not eaten a piece of that type of fruit for 12 months as being sufficient? Okay, so that is the common thread. That there's a sock from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that I saw many years ago. I do not recall in which volume I saw it, which is basically that nowadays that fruits are available on the market at pretty much any time. You may not see them in your stores, but you could definitely get it. So if you want a dragon fruit now, even though they tend to only show up around Rosh Hashanah time, you probably could go ahead and find dragon fruit if you look for it a little bit. It's almost impossible not to have a fruit available nowadays. So therefore, Shechianu on most fruits is kind of not possible. Nonetheless, we still retain the custom of putting a new fruit on the table for the second night of Rosh Hashanah, just to sort of keep that custom going. Second question was about permissibility of fruits. The question is, I once saw a bag of Washington, USA apples with an OU hechsher. I assumed I could thereby know that these trees' apples were the right year to be permitted for purchase. Yes, question mark. So how can I determine the status for general fresh bulk fruits and bagged tree fruits with no hechshers in the U.S. stores? So the question is assuming that, which would be correct, that a tree grown outside the land of Israel by a Jewish owner has a problem of what's known as orla, that the fruit of the first 3 years is prohibited. However, when you don't know and you're outside the land of Israel, you can assume that the tree is fine to eat from. So therefore, the OU hechsher doesn't necessarily say that that's the case. I don't believe that that's what they certify either. I would actually have to find out what they're actually certifying, or if the person just wanted an OU on their package to make it look better. Question. Must you eat hot food on Shabbos day? And this was from a person's friend who doesn't like challah. Yes, there's a mitzvah to eat hot food on Shabbos day. We say eight asher tafu ve'ed tavashu b'shelu ve'eskal ha'aldei v'hinichu lehem amishmer sadaboker. That you should keep hot. The Torah itself is talking about it's a nice thing to have hot food on Shabbos day. This is echoed in the rabbis. This is echoed in the Shulchan Aruch. So you should keep hot food for Shabbos day. Even a hot cup of tea would be good, and even on hot days. Here's a great question. If a non-Jewish painter removed a kosher mezuzah and then replaced it back again, so they were painting, and puts it in the same position and condition, does the resident Jew have to reaffix it again after that to be correct by halacha, or can it stay as it is? So the question is, if it's removed and does it end the mitzvah for it? It doesn't seem like it has been, because once it's been affixed there, you have done your job. So the mitzvah was fulfilled. So even if it's taken down temporarily and put back up, it doesn't change the mitzvah. So same thing too, when you take it down to check it, you don't have to make a new blessing because you've already done the mitzvah, which was to affix it initially. So even if they take it down and put it back up, you'll be okay. Next question I have here is a question about Ta'anis Dibur. Ta'anis Dibur is translated as fasting from speaking. Okay, so the question was, upon conversion, this is something I desire and need to do in order to express my reverence and gratitude for Judaism. How will this impact fulfilling one's religious obligations, or does it? Is there a limitation on how long one can engage in Ta'anis Dibur? Would one not be holding true to Ta'anis Dibur if they choose to speak to persons of significance to them, such as a wife, a daughter, or a son, a grandchild, etc.? So the idea of Ta'anis Dibur is a much later invention. It's only something that's been developed over the past few years, trying to teach people to kind of hold their tongue and focus a little bit. So it's fairly recent, and therefore the focus should be on the person learning to control how they say things and do things. So it's basically, since it's a voluntary action, you have to be careful about how you take your oath. And in fact, we recommend people just don't take oaths in general. So you can say, well, I'm going to refrain from saying things bli neder the whole day, and just concentrate yourself. I'm not speaking bli neder, not speaking bli neder. So whatever rules you want to make for it, whatever rules you want to make for it. There's no real plan for that. Okay. Buddha altars in the restaurant. If you go to there's a restaurant in New York called Buddha something or other, and has an idol in the restaurant. It has a hechsher in the restaurant. I don't recommend eating there for the same problem. Don't eat at Buddha restaurant. I've heard this a few times from people where sometimes the rabbi will give a hechsher to a restaurant, and the people working there will go ahead and put the food on the little altar. And it reminded me of this old scene in the movie Major League, where one of the players there keeps making an offering to an idol to be able to play baseball better, and it's absurd. So if the people are engaging in that activity and they're doing that, don't eat in that restaurant. Don't eat from there. Now, someone asked me and said, "Wow, well, there's an OU certified product with a big picture of Buddha on the front of it." So I wrote to the OU and I said, "What's up with that?" I haven't heard back from them, so I will write to them again and find out what's up with that. Someone then showed me a Bragg organic apple cider vinegar. There's a hechsher on it, and then there's a little fish-looking thing that says 3 John 2 on it, quoting a verse from the New Testament. So the question is, how would you certify that? So I would be curious to hear what they have to say about it. And so basically, that it says that that basically the verse itself is just a prayer for prosperity. So it may not be so bad because it's not actually prescribing belief in something. It's quoting a source. So it's, I one time saw a hechsher that basically quoted a tshuva of Avad Yosef to permit their product on it. I saw it years ago. I haven't seen it since. So that may actually be enough to permit it. Someone tells me also here they had New Testament Bible verses written all over their shampoo and their soap, and they decided to refrain from doing it. That that would also be acceptable as well. But it seems like in this case for this apple cider, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal because it's just a blessing that they should be prosperous. So there's a prayer that should be prosperous, which seems that should be okay. Another question I had was, is modern Hebrew sufficient for reading the Torah, or is biblical Hebrew required? Well, you want to learn how to read Hebrew, so you need to learn how to read it. Biblical Hebrew will teach you better about how the Torah is written, because the conjugation of words and the practice of the language is slightly different between ancient Hebrew and modern Hebrew. So if you just learn Hebrew, start with learning to read the words, learn the letters, and so on. And my experience has been that no one has a steadfast and significantly decent answer for what is required in terms of somebody learning Hebrew. You do need to teach so there's two things to deal with over here. One is you need to teach your children Torah, so they should be able to learn and read biblical Hebrew, and not necessarily learn to read modern Hebrew. So that would be the preference, is to learn biblical Hebrew so that you can, number one, read the Torah, and that's an obligation, is for you to read it. And the obligation to read it is to read it every parsha of the week, one time through in Hebrew and 2 times through in the translation, preferably the Aramaic one. But if you can't access that, you can rely on the opinions that say you can read a translation in any language. It's not such a easy thing to say, because the rabbis did not like the Greek translation of it, but it seems like if you can't read Aramaic, you might as well read some translation of it. Definitely should read Rashi. Now, if you're reading Rashi, again, that's like Mishnaic Hebrew. It's different. So every Hebrew is different. But you definitely should learn the language so that you can learn those things in their original tongue. And you'll better understand how the words are used and what the actual meaning is implied. And then the Rashis will make more sense. What if you want, so the extent of the question is, what if you want clear comprehension of Tanakh, Zohar, Talmud, Chumash, etc.? If you want to learn both modern and biblical Hebrew, which should you learn first, and what is the better translation, and why? So, if they've translated some stuff into modern Hebrew, that's for sure, but it doesn't make it any more intelligible. It just means it's in Hebrew. So you should start with preferably biblical Hebrew in order to properly learn these things in Hebrew. Now, in terms of what's expected educationally of people, so children in school have an expectation to learn the biblical Hebrew and to learn modern Hebrew. So that's just the expectation nowadays. In the more Haredi areas, the modern Hebrew is not so important, but many of them speak it because that's their language, so they'll pick it up anyway. In some places, they still teach Yiddish, so they'll learn biblical Hebrew and they'll learn Yiddish, but they won't learn to speak modern Hebrew. And in terms of people who are converting to Judaism, I've seen on a number of places that there's a requirement to learn Hebrew. The Talmud itself never requires to learn Hebrew. There's a story of Hillel teaching a non-Jewish person to read the Hebrew letters, but it's not mentioned by a single posek anywhere that learning Hebrew is required. The requirement to convert is to accept as binding upon oneself the mitzvos. Were a Beis Din to refuse people to enter the Jewish people because they couldn't read Hebrew, that Beis Din might be in violation of oppressing the convert as a result of such a policy. It would be important to maybe send somebody back and hold off the conversion for it, but if everything else is fine and the only thing is that they haven't learned to read Hebrew and they refuse to grant the conversion based on that, such a Beis Din should be challenged as to their authenticity and their condition to conversion. That while Batei Din are permitted to go ahead and make rules and such for the Jewish people, they are also guarded against oppressing the convert. And for somebody who has already demonstrated themselves as quite capable of observing the mitzvos, reading Hebrew was never a requirement. In fact, Jewish people used to identify themselves by speaking Yiddish and not Hebrew in the 19th century. So it seems almost anathema to me that I still hear stories about that. One person told me that they were denied a conversion because they didn't know how to recite the Birkat Hamazon by heart. Let's see. More Buddha stuff. There used to be a bigger picture of Buddha on there. I will have to get back to that another time. And so that is the end of the questions we have received on social media. That is part of it, is keeping track of all the interesting questions. So what's some other interesting questions that we had this week? I didn't see any live questions. Live questions over here that I missed? No, I did not miss any live chat questions. So just to address a couple of interesting questions that have come up over the course of the week. If you have a cool steamer, meaning you have it's basically a ultrasonic a humidifier, and you can add certain smells and scents to it. Can you fill it up again on Shabbat? Is that a problem? So it depends on how the device is made. If you take out the water tank and the device shuts off, and then replacing it would turn the device back on, that would not be permitted. If you were adding water into an already active device, that would be permitted. However, it would be a problem if it made a change in status, like a light goes from green to red, where it shows it's in bad zone, it's in good zone. These are similar issues, for example, like using the oven and such. You can't use a hot one because you're cooking the water. So it has to be an ultrasonic cool one that basically helps to using ultraviolet light to change the liquid water into gas, so that you can use energy to excite it to turn it into gas, but you cannot cook it to turn it into that. It's a different function altogether. The question was adding fragrances to it could be a problem, but is interesting. Can you stand near a room heater with wet hair on Shabbos to help dry the hair? If you're standing at a distance where the water could not reach Yad Soletisbo, then you could do that. That's based on the fact that one is allowed to put water. The Gemara says it very clearly, it's right on the Shulchan Aruch. If you put down a pitcher of water near a fire in a place where it cannot reach Yad Soletisbo, then you could stand there. So I would say the same thing would be applied to wet hair. You also can't wring out your hair, so you have to just sort of stand there, like next to the radiator, like this, drying your hair out at a distance where your hair couldn't get really hot. I would say that would apply. That would apply the same thing. And I think the same thing would apply is if you wanted to lay on the floor or stand next to a heater somewhere that's blowing hot air. As long as it's not a place where your hair can become Yad Soletisbo. Hair dryers, for example, can get pretty hot. They can get the material and probably the water to be above that temperature. The temperature of Yad Soletisbo is anything above 104 degrees, and the idea is that it becomes uncomfortable for your hand to stay there for an extended period of time. The idea is I put my hand here. Oh, 2 days. I remember one time someone did that to me. They said, "Is this Yad Soletisbo?" I said, by definition, that's exactly what it is. It's too hot for me to leave my hand there. You have to leave your hand there comfortably and not want to take it off. Generally speaking, scalding occurs at 120 degrees. So a lot of hot water heaters will want you to stay closer to 104 to 108. So 104 is a good, safe number to feel that. If you were to immerse yourself in 104 degree water, you really couldn't stay there for very long. And so therefore you would at some point remove your hand from it for it being uncomfortable. Water less than that, something between 98 and 103 is generally if you were to have, let's say, a jacuzzi would be what most jurisdictions have in terms of safe water temperatures. Okay, I think if there's no further questions, we can hold it here for today. Alrighty, thank you very much, everyone, for coming out. I will see you next time.